Welcome to the All Things Real Estate Podcast with our very own Josh Barker. With more than 20 years of experience and over 5,000 properties sold, Josh brings a unique perspective to the real estate market. Let's get started.
Okay. Welcome back, Josh.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
It's November. This blows my mind saying this out loud. November of 2022.
Time flies when you're having fun, my friend.
Yeah, and even when you're not. It's like 2022 is almost over. Mm-hmm. And it's been quite the year for real estate.
Yeah, we had a little bit of a transformation, haven't we?
Yes, we have.
Yep.
And we were talking before the camera started, we were talking about, the big news in real estate has been interest rates. This time last year.
Yep.
I mean, we're talking a huge difference.
Yeah.
And a major, what you'd call a headwind.
That's right.
Major headwind. But there's a little bit of good news that, hey, there's a rainbow behind this monsoon thunderstorm. The interest rates went down.
It went down a little bit. Yeah. So for our listeners, it was, I think our lowest point was about 3.25%, roughly of interest rates. It was in the mid sevens, not even a month ago. And right now we're about 6.75% over the last week. So that report that came out from the Feds basically saying, hey, we got some good news on that looks like inflation might be cooling a bit, even though they're not reporting that really until next month. Some of the other lead indicators are telling them that. And so as a response to that, the interest rates actually came down just a little bit. For everybody too, it's just for every 1% the interest rate goes up, it has an impact of about 10% on purchasing power. So when the rates dropped to 0.5%, that increased purchasing power by 5%. And last week we've seen some sales go up because of it.
And if you're talking about a $400,000 house, that's $20,000.
It is.
Yeah.
It's significant.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Big. We were also talking about, because one of the themes that has been going through this year is we've been comparing the inventory, the thing that you call the absorption rate, meaning if nobody brought a house to market, how long would it take for the current inventory to sell off, because that's a big sign of whether we're in a seller's market, a neutral market, or a buyer's market. Now, we've obviously over the last few years have been in this like insane seller's market. At one point, it was like 1 point something.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
And 3 is the magic number. Where are we? Like, right, 3 months is.
Yeah. So 1 to 3 months supply is essentially, considered to be a seller's market. And then from 3 to 4 months supply is normally considered a neutral market. And then 5 months or more is considered to be more of a buyer's market. And that tends to be, at least for our marketplace, that's what it kind of tends to be. Right now, we're at the 15th of the month for this podcast. That's what the date is today for this filming of this. And I think we were at 98 pendings for the month. And we had 715 residential properties for sale. So if you do the math on that, we're going to probably be reporting in our market update this next month. I think we'll be reporting that we're in that 3 month supply, which means that we're on the tail front end of a neutral market in terms of, demand relative to supply.
So which means that, you got 2 things going on. Number one, interest rates are heavily affecting sellers and buyers, obviously buyers, but if you don't have buyers, then sellers, and sellers aren't bringing inventory. So it's starting to slow off a little bit, because the number was creeping. I remember it was in the low ones, jumped up. I think the last time we spoke, it was like 2.9. So it's not just racing up, but it is starting to level off a little bit.
It is, and our inventories right now are right around 715 or so homes for sale. We saw a peak in the last few months, I think in like 740, 750 range. And part of this is seasonality too. I mean, there's fewer people that want to come to the market, in November, December than there is in, spring, for example. So it's not really uncommon to see our inventories decline a little bit at this time of year, and that's having an impact, obviously, on the absorption rate. But really the good question I think everybody's asking is what's going to happen next year? Are a lot of folks going to come to market? And if they do, at what volume? What is the demand going to look like? Because that's going to tell us a lot about what to expect next year.
Yeah, and you'd have to have a crystal ball because trying to think about, well, are we going to have a big demand? Are we going to have a big push of people moving to Redding again next year? Or has the whole telework, has that kind of settled out? Because during COVID, we had a massive push. Yeah. And I've been, like I said, I go on a radio show with a local lender a few times a year. And for the last several years, I've been bullish on people moving here. But I think it's leveled off. I don't think we're getting that.
Yeah, I think, the peak of COVID, obviously. I mean, during the pandemic, you had people that were migrating significantly for multiple reasons. And I think now, obviously, that big, robust, migration pattern shift is obviously over. Whether or not people are going to continue to be able to work from home and have those types of jobs, people moving up here, I think that's still going to happen. It's just not going to happen the same volume that it was before. But the median sales price in the market right now is $350,000. And if you go back 1 year ago in the same month, it was $350,000. So our prices actually went up last year after October. But at this point, we've given back a lot of the market gains from last year up to this point, in terms of prices coming down a little bit and softening. But if you take the median buyer and what they qualify for, and you compare that to the median selling price right now, it's still a delta of maybe $40,000-$50,000.
Yeah.
And so the headwinds are still there. And the only thing that can change that is interest rates going down, inventory continuing to decline, or wages going up. It's going to take something along those lines to get it done.
Do you know much about inventory besides sellers bringing to market? Are there a lot of projects for construction? I remember a few months ago we talked about how D.R. Horton was one of the first indicators, because they're a big corporate builder. So they just came right out and said, "Hey, we're dropping our price." Was it 10% or 5%?
Yeah, they were like in the 470, 480 range, and those same products were down in the 440, 450 range in a short amount of time. To answer your question, I mean, we are definitely seeing builders tapping the brakes a little bit in terms of new construction. It's certainly not as robust as it was a year ago, for example. It's beginning to feel like they're just being cautiously optimistic right now. I mean, it's hard, right? I mean, the part that's getting better for them is their access to labor is getting better. The cost of materials and supplies is going down. And so that gives some flexibility to their pricing strategy if they're trying to be, more price competitive against the resale market. So, but there's some headwinds there right now. And while we're in a higher interest rate environment, where you had the rates double in less than a year, that's what you're going to be up against.
And so, when I think about this stuff, it's the data that we kind of bring in these podcasts. There's certain things that's like, it's just information. It's like, well, what can I do with that? It's like, you can't do anything. You can't lower interest rate.
Right.
If you're thinking of selling and you're selling because you're moving, it's it almost doesn't matter.
Yeah.
What's going on. If you have to move, you have to move.
Yeah.
If you were thinking, hey, I'm going to sell my house at retail and then I'm going to go pick up a house at wholesale. Yeah. I mean, that's you're watching too much AETV. I'm just going to house flip real quick. But it's like some of this data, it's like, what can you really do about it?
Be calm. I mean, when you're saying all that, I'm thinking to myself, we're like trying to be a calming force, right? I mean, people always want to jump to one extreme or the other. It's either, oh my gosh, we're going to the moon. Or, oh no, we're going to be the worst thing since the last recession. And it's like, it doesn't have to be like that. I mean, this time around, the market cycle is a bit different than the fact pattern it was last time. And we've talked about that on previous podcasts. But I think if anything, it's just to be calm about it and say, look, here's what's going on. Yeah, we have some pressure on the housing market right now. Interest rates are high. It's having a corresponding effect on demand. You have a lot of people though that don't want to sell their homes. They're happy to be in their houses at a 3.25% interest rate. So we don't have inventory that's shooting through the roof. That's largely because we didn't have a massive amount of speculation over the last 24 months. Most of those purchases, the vast majority of them, were owner occupied, which really, really means that those folks, if they were to sell, they have to go find something. They have to go to the rental market or whatever, which that's interesting. The rental market has been changing.
How so?
Well, I was talking to a friend of mine that has a pretty good sized property management company, and I asked him, I said, how are things going on the property management side? I said, what's the vacancy rate like? And he was like, well, I mean, COVID was like 1%. And he's saying now that it's probably anywhere between 5 and 7%.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's jumped a lot. Give me an example of, he'd put a property on the market for rent at one point and, he'd get 15 offers on it or 15 applications for it. And now he can come into the office on a Monday and realize that there isn't any applications on that same product. And so, the rental market is beginning to show signs of, it's probably reached its peak. And I mean, for some of us that have been around, we saw some of the rent prices people were asking. We're like, this doesn't even look right.
Yeah, some of it was crazy.
It's crazy, right? And so I think that those folks, not the ones that are priced with the market. I mean, people that have rental properties and are pricing them fairly in the market based on comparable rents over the historical trend line, or all those are still those are rented out. But those people that were going out there and trying to, cut a fat hog, if I'm allowed to say that.
Mm-hmm. I think you're allowed.
Okay. I don't know what the rules are on that one. But that type of product is no longer really easy to rent out anymore. So I think it's going to show up too in the vacation rental market. The vacation rental market, the vacancy is beginning to go up. What they were getting for those rentals, vacation rentals at one point, is beginning to decline a little bit. We're seeing that too. For different reasons, though. I mean, some of it's associated with what I just said, but some of it's because, a lot of those vacation rentals, a lot of traveling nurses and doctors were utilizing some of those facilities instead of hotels. And that was because, some of the, I don't want to get into the politics of it, but some of the hospitals, with some of their programs and some of their, their rules or whatever, made it more difficult for people to be working in the medical field. And so in order for them to be able to facilitate the services they have to offer, they were bringing in traveling nurses and doctors. And now I think they're backing off on that a little bit. And that back off on that is taking off some of the pressure on the vacation rental market.
As we sit here and talk about this, I think this is like just an incredible dance of variables, just so many. The more data you take in, and it's for the people that are trying to time the market, like you said, it's a calming voice because, hey, look, if you're in a home, if you're renting, you probably want to buy if you can. If the interest rates doesn't make sense with the current inventory, it feels like based on, you didn't say this, but I'll go out on a limb here, is the median price is down from its peak.
Yeah.
Interest rates are still high. The delta is about 40 grand. So what does that tell you?
Yep.
Housing prices are probably going to come. That delta has to be fixed somehow. So either feds have to lower interest rates dramatically so that buyers can get that 40 grand, or the sellers have to come down. That's how that delta has to be dealt with.
It does, but I think where people do overestimate in terms of what's necessary, like based on that description, which it sounds right, prices would have to come down that much. But this is what happens when the prices start to come down, the buyer demand starts to pick up.
Yeah,
and we have to compensate for that adjustment too. If we move into a recession, which obviously it looks like that's what we're going to be in if we're not already there, and everybody can.
We don't use the R word, Josh.
Fair enough.
You can say fat hog, but you can't say the R word.
Fair enough. Okay, so since we have multiple quarters of less gross domestic product being sold, we won't call it anything else than that, right? During that season, normally the Fed, once they feel like that's the case and they see unemployment going up, they're going to start to cut the rates. And so that's what I'm saying is like when things start to change, the Fed's going to take some action too, right? So, if interest rates go down, then the corresponding effect is purchasing power increases and you see buyer demand pick up. That's just part of what happens in economics, right?
Yep.
So I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, well, next year will be interesting. We're probably going to have, some tougher days ahead over the next, quarter or so. Maybe 2 quarters. And then, at that point, hopefully we have a good feel for where the bottom is and in terms of adjusting and letting the Fed do what they're doing right now to try to get this inflation thing under control. And then we can resume whatever that new normal is going to be, but inflation is going to be an interesting thing next year.
Yeah.
Because I think that as those numbers start to improve, I think the optimism of the average consumer is likely to improve too.
And so interest rates, if they come down to where they were last year, that's going to fire it right. That's going to fire the kiln right back up. You know what I mean? Everything's going to start going crazy. But if interest rates can get down to, like you said, I think you said they're in the mid to high 6s right now.
Right now they are.
So if they get down in the mid to high 5s, you've got that delta. So if they come even down a half point and then sellers maybe do a couple of reductions, you're going to meet in the middle.
You're going to meet in the middle. That might be our new normal.
And it's going to shoot. It's, that's how it works. It always overshoots this way, then it overshoots that way.
Sure.
And so it's just going to steady out. But it was up until this year. It was just straight. It was bull market.
Yeah. Well, COVID it's like riding a bike down the street and somebody took a baseball bat and shoved it right through the spokes on your front tire and your back tire. And
you shouldn't hang out with that dude.
Yeah,
anybody does something like that.
We're still dealing with the aftermath of that because when the bike flipped, it broke the handlebar, it broke the seat post off. You know what I mean? You got a pedal that's off in the gutter somewhere, and now we're trying to piece this whole thing back together after you've picked it up off the ground, and so there's all kinds of leftover carnage from this massive economic catastrophe, if you will. Not to mention the fact that we just threw tons of money trying to solve the problem, which created its own issues, right? So there's a lot of work ahead of us to get this thing back to normal. It ain't going to happen in 6 months.
No. And so our headwinds are interest rates, Our tailwinds are low inventory, although that's kind of going away. The other big one is we were talking about people coming into the area. That's slowed down. I mean, all points seem to say the market's going to continue to come down a little bit.
Little bit. It's going to continue to soften a little bit. And I don't, it's funny because I hear this. I have lenders that'll run in and be like, oh my gosh, we're going to see rates at 10% in the next 90 days. I'm like, calm down. It's probably not going to be like that. And then the same people 2 months later or 2 weeks later come to me and go, oh, I just read this awesome report and rates are going to be at 5% in the next 30 days. And I'm like, calm down. It's not going to be that good either. It's like, just calm down. The rates are going to be likely in that high fives, mid sixes long term. That's historically been the trend anyway. When it gets a lot higher than that, it's unusual. If it gets a lot lower than that, that's unusual. So if we were to figure that it's going to be mid fives, mid sixes, that's a pretty decent market. And if we can get the darn market to stabilize where buyers and sellers in the marketplace go, okay, here's our fact patterns. Here's what the information is on the ground. Here's what we can expect. Now people can properly start planning. And planning is really what it takes for people to make moves. I mean, if you're going to stay locally, move up or move down or move sideways, or if you're going to leave the state or people are going to move into California from out of the area, all of that takes planning. And they want a fact pattern that's a bit more consistent so that they can make plans that they can rely on. And that takes time, and that's kind of where we're at.
Good luck with that.
I know.
Good luck at stability. When was the last time we had stability? Being serious, like when was the last time you're like, oh, it's totally stable market. We're at equilibrium.
I'd say probably 2015 to 19 was pretty cool.
Yeah?
Yeah, pretty stable. I mean, we were climbing. I mean, it was great because homeowners would buy in, and we weren't, hitting the cover off the ball, but have a home in value 5 to 7% in a year. That was pretty exciting news. They could decide to sell the home a year from then. They'd have enough equity to make some money if they wanted to and get on to the next home. And, that might even be a bit aggressive in terms of appreciation over the long haul, but it's still pretty nice. And I think that's we've had it where that's been the case. But the challenge what we had back in 14, 15 was that prices weren't quite high enough yet for builders to really build at a meaningful level and compete against the existing resale market. And that was the challenge. Like we were watching it, like waiting for home prices. We're like, okay, when home prices get to X number, home builders can start building again. You know what I mean? And we were watching that pretty closely, waiting for that number to hit. And it started to hit probably at a meaningful number in 17, 18.
I wonder if that number is now, to flip that, is it worth people to build now? It has to be somebody that has major infrastructure already taken care of. It can't be probably the individual unless they bought the lot years ago. Maybe they got it that post-car fire lot or something. It's like the cost to build a home right now is, with that property coming back down, it's probably they're back to that number again.
Yeah, they are. It's again, we talked about this I think on previous podcasts, but the construction field is going to have some disruption coming up, in my opinion, because you've got, you had at least here locally, what we had was, and for some of your listeners, we've had multiple fires that created this huge demand for new construction to rebuild a lot of those homes. We've had some pretty big hailstorms, which are fairly unusual for our market, which created a huge amount of re-roofs in the county. And then if you combine those two things, and then you had the pandemic, I mean, we had just a massive amount of labor in a very short amount of time in the area. And we're beginning to see, the housing market slowing down. And so you've got these crews now that are a bit more swollen compared to what they have been in the past, with all their, the different employees they have working for them. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens in the future with bid pricing and stuff like that. I could see the price per square foot going down, not just because supply and material costs go down, but also because labor potentially, or at least profit, the amount of profit that's acceptable is going to start to go down too.
When taking a kind of a step back, when we talk about year over year interest increase, so appreciation on homes.
Sure.
I'm thinking, do you want it to just be a little bit higher than inflate? Like what is an ideal sustainable growth number?
Well, don't go year over year. I go 5 years over 5 years.
Okay, fair enough.
Because everything modifies.
What about weekly?
Well, what people don't probably realize is that the Federal Reserve actually has a stated, they want inflation. They absolutely want inflation.
It was like 1 to 3% or something like that?
Yeah, I think it's like 2 something, right? Yeah. I have to double check what the number is. So everybody, I'm sure, listening can go and fact check this. But if you were to go to the Federal Reserve, go to the Federal Reserve site and look at their mandate. Their mandate will be to target a certain amount of inflation, which means they want inflation.
Yeah. Growth.
And that's how you get that growth, right? And then the second part of that you're going to be looking at is they also have a targeted number of unemployment, which means they actually want to cause some unemployment, which might sound counterproductive. But in a healthy work environment, we need people to have an equal leverage. I mean, employers and employees, to have a more harmonious relationship, we need to have some unemployment in the marketplace so that you have more value as an employer to offer a job to somebody. You know what I mean? It allows the work and the effort in which as an employer you receive from your employee to be a bit more meaningful and profitable because the person wants to keep their job. Whereas if the jobs are just too robust, it's like, well, you have to accept my 50% effort because if I don't, I'm going to go work for somebody else. And this is some of that disruption that we're going to see. And we're hearing some pretty good sized layoffs right now.
Amazon just reported 10,000 this week.
Yeah, these are big numbers. And they start to trickle into the economy because those people, obviously, while they're in a disruption of labor, they're not going to be out there making some of those higher dollar purchases, and they'll probably be cutting some expenses here and there. And that starts to have a corresponding effect on those markets that they would have been participating in. So, we're, like I said, we're 3 months to 6 months from now is when we finally start to see where we really stand in terms of economically.
So back to that 5 year over 5 year, what kind of appreciation would you want to see on a home? In a stable
market,
robust, but not crazy. Because what goes up comes back down. So when you get these white hot, there's the other side of the mountain.
Yeah, I would say 4 to 5% is probably something, and Redding tends to be
over a 5 year period, 5%
per year.
Per year, okay.
Compound effect. Yeah.
So 20 to 25%.
Yeah,
it's going to be more than that because the compound.
Yeah, it compounds, right? But that helps you to stay ahead of inflation. It gives you the ability to repurchase another home. I mean, and you got to realize too that Redding is a lot like those flyover states, right? In the sense that we don't have these massive, robust swings in our home valuations. Whereas you get on the coast, people think, whenever they hear I'm from California, and they're like, oh, you're from California. I'm like, yeah, but I'm not from the California you think I'm from. We can actually buy a home where we live, and I'm proud to say that. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you look at the Bay Area and Southern California, it's extremely expensive.
Insane.
And what they do in terms of appreciation has a lot to do with the economic factors on the ground at that time. When the economy's doing well, those prices down there are doing really well. When the economy goes down, they get back some value quickly. Our market, we don't go up and down as quickly as the Bay Area and Southern California does. So for anybody that's thinking about moving up here, just enjoy the fact you get to buy a great home. We're welcome. We can't wait to welcome you here. But realize that the valuation isn't going to be the same as what it was for you if you lived in LA. It's not going to go up as fast.
Well, at 4 to 5%, you're looking at the value of your home doubling about every 15 to 20 years, 15 to like 18 years.
Yeah.
So you think about you buy a home for $400,000 now, 20 years from now, it could be on average valued worth $800,000 at that growth rate.
Yeah. I think we use a rule of 72, I think, on that.
Yeah. That's what I was doing.
Yeah.
Kind of cheating math. I was using poker math. Like, wait a second. He's got 7 outs.
Well, here, we'll give a training tip right now. If you guys want to know what the rule of 72 is, if you want to know how to double an investment, basically you'll take the rate of return, let's say it's 5%, and you multiply it by whatever number to equal 72. And by doing that, that's how you're going to get that corresponding how many years would it take for you to double in value. So if you took 5 times 25?
No, 5 times 14.4.
Is that what it is?
14.4.
Yeah, that sounds right. Yep. And then it puts you there.
So I was like 14 and a half to about 17, 18 years is at that interest rate.
There you go.
There you go. Yeah. So that sounds reasonable. It sounds kind of crazy too at the same time because you think like 40 years later, a $400,000 house is $1.6 million.
I know.
And then I think I just described the East Bay. Or maybe they were getting a little bit better than that. Because I do remember being a kid, a teenager, and going down and visiting my aunt and uncle, and then buying a brand new house in, I believe it was Dublin at the time, and it was I think just these numbers. How you don't. You think of something and a number pops in your head and you go, I think that's the number because it popped in my head.
Right.
But I remember them buying it for like $100,000 and something. And it was a total track home, cul-de-sac, 4 floor plans, and hundreds of homes. But there were fields everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
I remember, walking down, and now you look at it and I'm sure that house has to be, I don't know, it's way over $1 million.
Oh, yeah.
Way over $1 million. And that was about, oh, wow, I'm much older than I anticipated 35 years ago.
Yeah.
But that sounds about right.
Yeah, I mean, if you were to look at, same thing. I have family in Santa Clara, purchased property for like $400,000. Last time I seen it sell, they didn't own it anymore. They had moved on to another property, but it was like $2 million. It's probably over the same period, like over 30 years.
Yeah,
that it did that. And it's it's interesting to see what real estate does over time. I'm obviously a huge advocate, and full disclosure, I'm heavily invested in the real estate market. And so for me, I like and I enjoy the benefits of appreciation, but I equally enjoy the benefits of cash flow. And I still think that if you want to find an investment that has proven itself over an extremely long period of time to perform well, it's not the magic answer. I invest in stuff like the stock market as well. I try to be somewhat diversified, but I'm more heavy in real estate because that's what I do. It's what I know.
That's what you know.
Yeah. And I've got friends that are stockbrokers, and obviously they do some real estate, but they're way more invested in the stock market because that's what they know. But I think it's wise to invest in something, because I think dollars, no matter what, it return to zero if they don't get invested into some sort of an asset.
Especially with the inflation, what we've seen this year. That's the whole idea, is that if you've got cash sitting in the bank, you're losing money.
You're losing money.
You're losing money at 8 to 10%, depending on.
You are.
Yeah. So you want to purchase assets that will appreciate.
Yeah.
And that's a whole.
Even in purchasing something that holds its value is going to be protected.
You're going to beat cash.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but like with investments, I mean, it's not a liquid position, or at least not very often. So you're going to have to commit to being in that investment for a period of time. Real estate is not an easy investment to diversify out of quickly. It takes a period of time to, market a property, sell a property.
One of the least liquid, if not the least liquid.
Yeah. Well, you could go get a refinance or pull cash out.
Yeah.
So if you are in a position where
you can't just run down to Goldmart and sell your necklace.
No, you sure can't.
And you can't get on E-Trade and,
right.
sell. Wait, everyone's selling, buy. So.
No, with real estate, you're going to want to be a bit more strategic and how you approach things. But I have the ability to access cash out of all of our properties at any given time if I wanted to. I don't choose to, because I don't. If I don't need it, why would you pay interest on stuff you don't need? But setting yourself up for that, I think investment in real estate still as a long-term prospect is a great investment.
I've got a question for you that's going to be. You're not going to be prepped for this.
We got 2 minutes, by the way.
Oh, okay. Are you familiar with what commercial rates are doing? Because normally when residential rates were at 3.25, commercial was at like 5.5. It's always a little bit higher. Sure. It just is. Yeah. But I'm wondering now, where are commercial rates? So I put you on the spot. If you don't know, it's cool, because I'm wondering, hey, I want to buy a 10-plex.
Yeah. Well, I've got some commercial lines right now. I mean, most of my building stuff is obviously fixed rate stuff, but we have our instant offer program. Mm-hmm. And, what we use that for is we have a huge line with the commercial line. Mm-hmm. And I just got my notification of what the rates are right now, and they just sent me the rates at 8.5%.
So same thing. They're a couple of points higher than residential.
They are.
So they just track. I think there was a time there a few months ago where you could have snuck in. Mm-hmm. And so we'll see the commercial, because the last few commercial buildings, apartment complexes, I keep my eyes open for that stuff. The prices hadn't come down at all.
Well, we don't have time. Well, they can't, because they have a cap compression issue. And that's going to be an interesting story going forward. There's a lot of folks that had some very short maturity on some of the notes they had on their investments on the multifamily side. There's a lot of people who were really getting aggressive into the multifamily space, with cap rates that were already compressed, and now rents are likely going to compress. And so, and now they're going to be paying more for that mortgage than they were last year. The rental market, we don't even have time to talk about that one today, because we're running out of time. But I would say if you were to look at like what's the next thing that we're going to see have some serious challenges. I mean, we've already had the stock market and the real estate class. Where would we get hit first? Mm-hmm. I would say it's going to be in the multifamily space.
So we have topics for next month, but just to leave everybody on a good note. We're talking about total pandemonium, cats and dogs sleeping together. I mean, real wrath of God type. Oh, yeah, right. Total wrath of God type.
We're done.
Clickbait. So, well, awesome. Thank you, Josh, for this month's report. And next month, I'll make a point of us definitely doing some homework to talk about commercial and rentals and stuff like that.
I think that's a great idea. Let's do that.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Josh.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
If you're enjoying the All Things Real Estate podcast, please feel free to subscribe, rate, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. That helps others find the show, and we really appreciate it. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next episode.